extension of parallelity between human and divine. It is commonly believed that God created man in his own form, in the underlying Mercury. That's why man is the epitome of creation. Where God created man in his own form. All the religions, philosophies, and sciences of the world more or less agree on this point. It does not mean that the physical form of God is the same as that of man. The human body, made up of flesh, bones, skin, etc., possessing arms and legs and other limbs, it really means that man possesses or is composed of all the powers, the forces, and energy which are present in nature in the same order. But he is differentiating between these three. He is differentiating between powers, forces, and energy. Anyway, now even as a science student, you need to work out what is the difference between these three: power, force, and energy. Now, the composition of man is exactly the same as that of the universe. Just as behind this solid external universe, there are innumerable others of finer and still finer types. So, behind this gross physical form of man, there are numerous finer and still finer forms of existence. The outermost form is the gross body or the Stula Sharir, behind which there exists the astral body or the Sukshma Sharir and causal body, the Karana Sharir. Besides these three outer forms, there are innumerable others which are so fine and subtle that thinkers do not call them bodies, but only as fine coverings around the soul. It is really very difficult to assign a name for each one of them, which may be countless. These three bodies, anyway, we know about it. So he's only talking about that there are n number of bodies. You don't call it as bodies, you call it as coverings, that's all. With all these innumerable forms from the finest to the grossest, man is in existence in the material world as a true copy of the universe or the entire manifestation of God. So that's why what is there in the macrocosm is there in the microcosm. So it is a true copy of the universe, represented by the complete circle from the outermost circumference to the innermost center of the zero. Man's existence and God's manifestation are really the same. In the 23 circle picture, that's what he's talking about. The innermost circle, the outermost circle. So the entire 23 circle is the creation of God. And man has the entire components of the 23 circle. That's the macrocosm being the microcosm. That is why realization of God means the same as that is why realization of God means the same as the realization of the self and vice versa. The entire universe came into existence from the same point, the zero, through the process of evolution. Similarly, man's existence too developed from the same point. So we're all coming out from the Kshob and then through the Kshob, we are going. At the Kshob, we divide into two. The one line of divinity, other one line of humanity. We belong to the country where religious spirit has ever been flowing in one or the other form. We are bred to have union with the reality we have emerged from. We have brought with us the same very essence of the reality, the infinite. They say that God is within man, thus, our ultimate purpose can be served only when we keep pace with divinity and link it up with the line of humanity. In other words, there is the divinity inside, there is that component of the infinity inside. We have got cut off from it, although it still seems to be influencing it on and off. Because we have got engrossed in the life of the outer coverings. The coverings develop a life of their own and we start getting engrossed in that life. And we forget that thing which is actually giving the power to these coverings, life to these coverings. So, this is why we read in this context that samskaras also have life. They are not like dead things which are just lying there dormant. No, they have life. So just to give a very simple example, if some child is practicing something and then two or three adults tell the child, you are doing well, I think you will come up in life in this whatever you are practicing, and that is enough. The child will start holding on to that thing which is doing it more and more vigorously. That is with a child. Take an adult. When they start alcohol, the thought of alcohol is not very strong. But as they do the intake of alcohol regularly, the thought of alcohol now gets such a big life that it becomes such a big covering. Their entire life is driven by that one covering of alcohol. That becomes the center of their life. Every other decision in their life is based on this particular center of the thought of alcohol. Now, what happened to the divinity inside? It is there, it is no longer apparent. So, we see many of these patients in the hospital. People who are ready to sacrifice their life for the sake of alcohol, drugs, emotions, relations, so many things. Any of these things. That's why moderation is necessary for every aspect of the covering. And if you remember, yesterday we read about it. For the divinization of man, what Babaji says is that divinization of the man is possible only there if there is absolute moderation. You remember PCMB? What is PCMB? Not physics, chemistry. Although we are all students of PCMB only. Our Gopal Krishna is nodding head vigorously. No, 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 I am not a student of balance. I am okay, I am PCM. I am not B. That's what I'm saying. PCME. So PCMB means perfect peace, perfect calmness, perfect moderation, perfect balance. That is the PCMB. That is the center. So when you have PCMB, you reach the center. And from the center, on the basis of the PCMB, the entire system of man is divinized eventually. That is one of the signs. For the divinization of man, the prerequisite is perfect moderation. Moderation in every activity. Okay. Now, as stated earlier, humanity was akin to divinity in the source of creation. What is the source of the creation? At the show, both humanity and divinity were like the same. And assume the grosser form as a result of the jerks caused by the actions and the counteractions in the process of evolution. Now, coming back to the questions yesterday I asked you. Now, with this the line of divinity, this is the line of humanity. Why did the human beings, human souls, acquire the coverings? This is the homework I gave you yesterday. What happens when you come down from the shore towards the end of the central region? What happens to the line of divinity? What happens to the line of the humanity? You remember the why of the tuning fork I showed you? So that journey of the why is the journey in the central region. So what is happening there? Why does man acquire coverings?
Because there's a sense of individuality.
Why does that come?
Because of various roles we get attached to.
There is no role there. In the central region, what role is there? There is nothing there.
identify ourselves as separate from the center.
That is covering.
That's what that was.
That is the question. How is the covering formed? The covering is formed in response to what? That's the question. That is correct. What happens to the human line of creation, the line of humanity, is that you form the sad, the separation, anxiety, and desire. The sad comes in the human component, line of humanity. Now, there is something that is happening in the line of divinity that is causing this in the line of humanity.
Evolution.
Evolution is a very, very broad term. For anything and everything, you can say evolution.
Divinity wanting to express itself in multiple forms, multiple
Okay.
ways.
So, how does it work? We just read the last sentence. Nobody paid attention.
Yeah, but that doesn't answer fully, I feel.
No, let's go
What does
back.
action and contraction mean?
Now remember, the line of divinity is just coming without any action or contraction. It is just passing through. But on the line of divinity, there is the force which is released, the power which is released, right? So it is that power that actually generates heat, and it is the heat that is causing these coverings to be formed. Without the heat, there is no covering. A dead body cannot form any new coverings. As long as a person is alive, when the heat is there in the system, you can form coverings. In the center, as you come down from the Kshob, what is happening? You remember always these two lines of humanity and divinity is actually influencing one another. It's not like they are two separate lines. It has no influence on one another. So the line of divinity influences the line of humanity, and the line of humanity influences the line of divinity. Okay, so when it's coming in, this is the Kshob. You at the Kshob, you have now two lines. Now this is the line of humanity. We are kind of sailing through here, coming down. Now we get the idea of separation, anxiety, and desire. But what is it that generates the separation idea? What happens is, as long as it's here without the force, there's no I. The moment the force starts acting here, which is the line of divinity, which is the reason for evolution or creation, which is what brother said, evolution. So when the force now from the Kshob explodes, it has an impact on the soul. Okay? When it has an impact on the soul, the first thing is the idea of separateness that is formed. Now you might wonder, what is this idea of separateness? Now go back to what we spoke about ego. What is the function of ego?
Survival.
Not only survival, self-protection, self-preservation. You remember that two words. The only role of ego is self-protection and self-preservation. Now see, the force is coming and bombarding the soul. What is the soul going to do?
So in a
It
way,
has,
soul is.
so the first layer of protection is the I that is formed. The idea of separateness. See, remember one thing, the soul itself doesn't have that kind of a power that is flowing through it. It has power flowing through it, but it's not like the action and the counteraction that is happening, the churning that is occurring there. The churning is not occurring inside the soul. The soul is just passing through there in the line of humanity. The churning is occurring on the other side. So the churning forces has an impact on the soul. So what does the soul do? How can the soul protect itself? It forms a covering. And that first covering is the I-ness, the separateness. Everyone is lost in the soul. Now please come back. If you take the three coverings as superfine ego, the three coverings, all these things will become very easy to remember. The three coverings that we get inside the central region is SAD. What is the basis of those three coverings? It is the actions and the counteractions of the forces of nature. That creates that action and counteraction, creates that reaction in the level of the soul. And the first covering is formed. And then you have the fear associated with it. And then immediately you have the fear, the desire to overcome that. To overcome the fear and the idea of separation. That's the whole point. Now, when you will be overcome the idea of separation and the fear, when we go back to the center. In other words, what happens when you go back to the center? We escape the effect of the forces of nature. Does it make sense? Father is scolding the child. What does the child do? We have all done it. If the father is scolding left, right, center, father is ready to beat you up. What are you going to do? You are going to cry. Okay. No. You are going to do something to protect yourself.
Escape.
Escape where? Escape to an area of protection. And what is the area of protection?
Mother.
That's all. That's exactly what you are doing. So the forces of nature is acting upon you. And now you get the desire that I have to escape this force. I cannot tolerate this force. So you want to escape. Escape where? You have to go back to the center. When you go back to the center, you are outside the purview of this force. You are no longer impacted. So the idea of separation is not necessary. You shut the idea of separation. Gone. There is no anxiety also. Idea of separation gone, anxiety gone, desire also gone. So the child runs to the cover of the mother. And the child hides behind the mother. So when the father tries to come and scold or hit the child, mother will protect. Don't do anything. He is under my protection. In other words, if father has to now hit the child, he has to go over the will of the mother, the protection of the mother. That is what happens. It's not possible because father himself came after the mother in this sequence. Mother was there originally. Then you had the globe. Only then the father came, the forces. Prior to that, only the mother was there. It's also one of the reasons if you take the guru as the mother, who can go up to the center very easily. It is expected that the mother is not going to beat up the child. It's the father who is going to beat the child. Right? Very rarely, occasionally, mother gets angry and then punishes the child. Right? You remember Krishna eats mud. And then Yashoda is very angry. She ties him up. And then when he ties him up, she asks him to show his mouth where he's eaten the mud. Then when he opens the mouth, that is when she sees that the entire universe is there in his mouth only. If Krishna had not eaten the mud, the Yashoda would not have peeked into his mouth. Even now, all children eat mud. You know that? All children eat mud. All of us have eaten mud. When we are young, we eat the mud. That is part and parcel of growing up. And when we grow up, we scold. If you don't study, are you going to eat mud? And mud chinತ್ಯ? ಏನು ಓದಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ, ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಲಿಲ್ಲ ಅಂದರೆ, bud is everywhere ಅಲ್ವಾ. You don't need to pay anything to anybody to eat bud. So that's why people, elderly people scold, are you going to eat bud when you grow up? Anyway, I hope it is easy now. ಇದು ಅರ್ಥ ಆಯ್ತಾ? ಈ ಕಡೆಯಿಂದ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ, ಸೋಲ್ ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇದೆ ಈ ಕಡೆಗೆ, ಕೆಳಗಡೆಗೆ. What in fact pushes the soul downwards is the reaction that it gets set up in the soul because of the forces of nature. In other words, the forces of nature is not directly pushing the soul, it is indirectly making the soul develop those coverings. As and when more coverings are formed, the soul is becoming heavy and then it kind of goes down out of the central region. Everyone is so quiet, trying to go back to that level and see what happened in the central region. Now, the forces and the counter forces create the heat. So, now the identity that we had got is the space element. And then, now as we come out of the choke and come through the central region, we now develop the fire element, component of fire. So, in the central region, we have got two things, the space component and the fire component. As we come down outside the 13th point, as we go down towards the 10th point, we form other three elements. Initially, water is formed, then earth is formed, then lastly, the air is formed. So, any questions on this? Does it make sense? In other words, if we want to go back to the center, one fundamental thing that we have to do is decrease the heat. Without the decrease in the heat, without the shedding of the fire component, we will not be able to enter to the center. And it is the heat that is absolutely necessary for us to do any work in this realm. Since anybody traveling in the central region, their heat will be gradually reduced. When the heat is reduced, they appear to have inertia, so to say. Everyone has now developed inertia. Go ahead, Ganesh, you want to ask something?
How to reduce the heat?
Reduce the food intake. That's where the fasting comes in. Cold water bath. Being exposed to the elements of nature. All these things actually reduces the heat in the system. Not getting emotionally charged up. Not getting doing too much of vigorous physical exercises. So no yogi can do 6 hours of gym because that will be against the tenets of yoga. In other words, you actually gradually go towards more and more moderation. So you decrease the heat in the system. In other words, you don't unnecessarily think. There is no emotional outburst. You stop imagination. You stop forming samskaras because the samskaras, when formed, they go inside and they get life and they fight with one another. They dash against one another. All of which generates heat, right? So yesterday we were talking about this. When you rub two stones, what is the first thing that you get? You get the heat, spark, or fire. What is the first thing that you get?
Heat.
First is heat, then spark, then fire,
Then fire.
right? So central region is heat. As you come down, there is the spark. The spark is like the formation of our subtle body. Then in the gross body, we manifest the fire. All the three. So the heat there, then the spark, and then the fire. Do you think that you remember when somebody becomes highly emotionally charged? Do you think that that emotional charge is restricted to the mind only, or is it now visible through the entire physical body?
Entire physical body, and it also emanates it outside.
It just goes out. The fire of that emotion is felt by others also, no? It is not only exhibited in our body, but it's also felt by others around you. Whether it's happiness, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, all the three. If you are feeling sad inside, what do you do at the physical body level? You start crying, you start sobbing. Everyone will start coming and asking you, what happened to you? Why are you crying? You remember that. In other words, when that intense feeling of sadness comes out, it manifests in the body. The entire body responds to that feeling of sadness. You are intensely angry. Angry. What happens? The heart starts beating fast. You start raising your hand. You start developing that extra energy in the entire system. Alva. Now, next time when you become emotionally charged up, observe yourself. If you have the ability to observe yourself, you can observe. That's why you're meditating. To observe yourself in all states of your being. So that is one emotionally charged state of being. Observe yourself. What happens? Entire body responds. In other words, the spark that is there at the level of the mind manifests as fire at the level of the body. Now, if the spark now sustains at the level of mind itself and then continues for days together, then we call it as a mental illness. Getting occasionally angry, occasionally sad is fine. It happens to everybody. That's the spark that is there in the mind. It is part and parcel of the functioning of the spark in the mind. But suppose you get sadness and then for days together you are sad for no reason. And we call that as depression. In other words, the spark at the level of the mind has taken the form of a fire at the level of the mind, which is not supposed to happen. Does it make sense? The spark at the level of mind has now taken the role of a fire. Then you are stuck with it. And no matter what you do, it doesn't go down. Then you require some firefighter. That's why you come to the doctor, psychiatrist, for fighting. So every patient of ours who come to us is nothing but caught in the fire of the mind. So they require something to douse the fire at the level of the mind. That's why they come. And now you look at it. If the fire is felt at the level of the body versus the fire being felt at the level of the mind, which is the one which is going to impact the soul more? Which is going to impact the soul more? Are?
The one on the heart.
Which is one? The mind is going to impact the heart more, or the body is going to impact the heart more? Which one?
Mind.
Obviously, the mind only, no? The mind and heart work in correlation with one another. The body is working at a different level. The mind and the heart work on each other. So when the mind is set on fire, it immediately impacts the heart. Even if the body is set on fire, it does not impact the heart so much, so strongly. Does it make sense? Why? Of the two, of the physical illness and the mental illness is more said to be more detrimental to a person than a physical illness. Even if a person has physical illness, if they have good functioning of the mind, they can still actually do pretty good in life. But if the mind develops an illness, then that is a lot more detrimental. So obviously, you remember if the mind develops the illness, there is no question of working on the heart in that state of mind. So you become incapable of working on the heart with that state of mind. So realization is not possible because for realization, what you require is the mind only. Can you see? So everyone is very quiet and serious today. Then you will ask the question, Are, if you are setting fire to the body and the mind, what are we supposed to do? Be quiet only. So our Ganeshan is yawning and trying to douse the fire with the gulp of air. Anyway, shall we finish this paragraph? At least we would have been happy that we finished 2 pages. So as stated earlier, humanity was akin to divinity at the source of creation and assumed a grosser form as a result of the jerks. See, it is written here as a result of the jerks caused by the actions and inactions in the process of evolution. That's why I told you to read the last sentence. I told you the answer is there only. We have only
Answer
to
was
bring
there.
on. Sorry.
I was just saying, answer was there, but we didn't understand the answer. So,
So we have only to bring all the constituents of the human frame of existence again to its original state of poise and tranquility to keep it up in the line of divinity. This is achieved by introducing in them proper moderation. I told you, all that you need to do is bring proper moderation. And we do that the same in Sajmark. The routine practice of meditation really aims at removing immoderation therefrom by the action of our will so as to keep up the balance. So once you remove that immoderation, the balance is restored. So generally, moderation and balance they go hand in hand. Thus, the humanity in us begins to get transformed into divinity. This is in fact the exact sense conveyed by the term divinization of man. This having been done, the parallelity disappears and both humanity and divinity become almost one. Humanity, however, can never become totally extinct as long as one has the body with him. So a semblance of separation is maintained as long as we are alive here. Thus, by the effect of meditation under the system of Sajmark, we go on reducing the intensity of the force working along the line of humanity. You remember, now we have brought that force of the Kshobh with us as mind. Right? Nature is anyway working on us. And now we utilize the force of the mind also, which is nothing but part of the Kshobh. What happens then in terms of heat?
It is diverted towards spirituality.
Correct. But then what happens to the overall level of the heat? Externally, we are under the influence of nature, so that is creating heat. Then internally, because our mind is active, that is also creating heat. What happens to the overall level of heat?
Increases.
What do we do in meditation? That's an answer to a question. How do we reduce the heat? What do you do in meditation?
We heat the samskaras, and those are dislodged.
That is one aspect. But what exactly you do in meditation?
Reduce the heat.
How?
Cleaning.
You are cleaning. So the perceptor is cleaning. We don't clean during the meditation. The perceptor cleans. Right? So the samskaras is a source of heat. So that is getting removed. Now it is the samskaras which interact with the nature force. So that is also now getting reduced. Thirdly, when we do the meditation, we don't imagine, we don't use force, we don't go behind the thinking, thought. All those three also reduces the heat. So the entire session of meditation, when you take a sitting, then heat component is coming down in your system. What we do during the meditation reduces the heat. The samskaras are getting removed by the perceptor cleaning. That also reduces the heat. If the samskaras are down, that reduces the chance of interaction with nature, because it's a, you remember that thing from the heartfulness way, the proximal cause and the immediate cause. Nature is the proximal cause. The samskaras that we carry is the immediate cause. It is the amalgamation of these two that actually creates the reaction and forms the samskaras. You remember that? Forgot. So there are two causes for any reaction. One is the proximal cause, other one is the immediate cause. The immediate cause is the samskara that we carry. So when the immediate cause is removed, the proximal cause ceases to have an impact, which means the forces of nature ceases to have an impact on us. By this way, we reduce the heat overall in the system, and we gradually, as the heat reduces, we gradually move towards moderation. Does it make sense? And externally, we take cold items. We don't take sattvika food means the food does not generate too much of heat in the system. That is sattvika food. Sattvika food keeps the heat under moderation. That kind of food you take. If you eat rajasika and tamasika food, it is going to overall increase the heat in the system. Does it make sense? Why we say don't take non-veg, don't take alcohol? Because those things are tamasika food which increases the overall heat in the system and makes you more immoderate and lose balance. So any person who is actually in meditation over a period of time, whether they like or not, they move towards the sattvic food. Not only they move towards the sattvic food, they also moderate in the quantity of the food that they take in order to keep up the heat in the moderation. And somebody says something, a person who is aligned to spirituality will not think too much about it. Okay, they said something, let them think, whatever. Because the moment you actually catch hold of it and start thinking about it, you are generating heat now. Why do you want to do it? So you let go of everything. Letting go is another way of reducing the heat in the system. Don't tell me that. That's why I'm actually letting go of my samsara. Why let go of people reactions from other people? I will let go of the samsara only. This is what our ancestors used to do. They used to let go, shut the samskara and go to forest. Our problem is, even if they go to forest, they have not removed the immediate cause. They still carry that immediate cause with them to the forest. So what Lalaji said is, rather than go to the forest without removing the immediate cause, being samsara only, remove the immediate cause, then automatically the heat in the overall system will be reduced. That's all Lalaji said. So that's why we say our system is specifically suited for grihasthas. Does it make sense? How all these things work? So thus by the effect of meditation under the system of Sahaj Marg, we go on reducing the intensity of the fine working along with the line of humanity, force working along with the line of humanity. The force working along the line of humanity is the kshob. When the mind is working more than what is necessary, you are creating samskaras. That's the force which is working, the kshob. So we actually bring that also into proper regulation. That's what we do. Divinity thus begins to gain ground and parallelity begins to diminish. In other words, humanity begins to get charged up with the force of the divinity, which in the course of time begins to prevail all over. When the condition gets settled, finally, fully, the parallelity is gone and humanity along with the force of creation is reduced to insignificance. That's the state of insignificance. You remember, we read about it. Ninth point is the state of insignificance. Then the state of negation. Then the state near the center. In this way, God being infinite, man at his highest level of approach too is likewise within the sphere of humanity. When human limitations are gone and the expanse of the self becomes unlimited, so much so that the entire universe seems to be contained within the self. Anything then that strikes anywhere in the universe causes an echo in his heart. Everything within the nature is then in his knowledge and perception. This is what happens when we align ourselves to the center, because the entire universe is within our heart. I told you, remember, the center is the heart. Let us give our heart to the center. And the entire creation is within the purview of that heart, which is the center. So when we give our heart to the center, which is the center, the entire creation is within you now. So whatever happens anywhere in the creation, you will get to know. Anything that happens in anywhere in the body, you will get to know, no? I'm not feeling right today. My right hand is aching. My left hand is tingling. Something you will say, you will feel it, no? Likewise, anything that happens in the creation anywhere, you will get to know. Because you have now expanded across the entire universe. And the universe is contained within the self. The self is the center. Anyway, the early glimpse of this is what you get when you enter into the Brahmanda Mandala. When you enter the Brahmanda Mandala, you start expanding across the universe, the feeling of expansion. And then eventually, you expand so much when you come to the center that you are lost. You are lost in the sense that now you become aligned with the center. Anyway, I think we'll stop here. Any questions you can ask?
Same question I asked earlier also. So this process is common for everybody, right?
This
This process, whatever we
is
achieve,
common. It's the same for everyone.
everybody has to go through this.
So, Ganeshan, are you now thinking of getting married?
Not the question of marriage. I'm thinking of the overall population, the people, different people have different reactions. Yesterday I was listening to a podcast, when one person was like, it's a spiritual podcast. He was talking about how to be like a man, um, like a warrior, like, or Charji also used to say, be like a lion. Right? But here, what we have read today is like, reducing the heat and going everything. It's just
Don't think that you cannot be a lion just because you've reduced the heat. When you go towards the center, your will becomes so powerful that whatever you will happen. You don't need to physically strive too much for that. You make the sankalpa and that is it. It manifests. You become very powerful, like a lion. You don't think of lion at a physical level, the energy, power that the lion has. No, you become even more powerful. You have so much sankalpa shakti. Because your will in now, the individual will is aligned with the divine will. It's become one. So it's become so powerful that it's called as Brahmagati, unfailing will. So if you make a sankalpa, it is bound to happen. That is what happens. That is what Chariji means when he says, be like a lion. Be like a lion with a very powerful will. That is what the masters feel. Not be like a lion physically fighting at the physical level. That's not what they mean. What they mean is develop that strong, unfailing will. That is what they mean. And that means you have to go towards the center. The more closer to the center you go, the more stronger the will becomes. Compared to a person whose will is functioning at the first point, a person whose will is functioning at a higher point will be stronger. Now, having a strong will is different. Exercising the strong will is different. You might have a strong will, but you might choose not to exercise it. Okay? Because the exercise of the will also makes some amount of heat form. Some formation of the heat takes place because of the exercise of the will. That's why it's called as willpower. Remember the word willpower, thought power. We add power to the will, we add power to the thought. You can get a thought, but you need not add power to it. You can get a will, you need not add power to the will. They are two separate things. When the power is added, some amount of heat is generated. So the will, which is aligned with the center, is aligned with powerlessness, which is the source of all power. So it's the most powerful will. The will which is aligned with powerlessness in the center, since the powerlessness is the source of all powers, it is the most powerful will. It appears a bit contradictory, but that is what it is. A will which is aligned with the center with powerlessness is the most powerful will. Because powerlessness is the source of all powers of nature. In other words, all the powers of nature is embedded in that aspect of powerlessness. The child cries. That's all. When the child cries, somebody, whether they are related to the child or not, they have to come and pick up the child and pacify the child. The child doesn't do anything. It doesn't call anyone by name. It doesn't identify this or that. A baby which is in the cot is crying. The crying is such that the vibrations that it creates in anybody around is such that you feel compelled to go and pick up the child, the baby. You will not be able to resist it. That's the kind of vibrations that it actually generates in the heart. It could be anybody. It doesn't matter who is it. It could be a rowdy. It could be a most loving person. It could be a mother. It could be a father. It could be a relative, friend. It hardly matters what they are in life. They will be compelled to pick up the baby. Now the question is, are we capable of crying in such a way that we compel the master to pick us up? So now don't tell me from today I'm going to start practicing that kind of a crying. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says that everyone is crying for something or the other. Why don't you cry for God only? Who is the giver of everything? You will get everything. You cry for things which are created by Him. Why don't you cry for Him only? He also says people are mad behind so many things in life. Why don't you be mad? The best madness is to be mad for God. And if you develop that kind of a madness, there is no other happiness associated in any other thing after. The madness that you get for God is associated with such a kind of divine intoxication that you don't feel any other thing in this life intoxicating. Anyway, that's why you practice crying in the night. Anyway, for 7:35, our other group will be waiting. So I have to tell them that we were all crying today. Okay, no problem. We will catch up on Monday. Okay.
Yeah.
Namaste then.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much for your time.
Thank you.